Hello, everybody. This is Tony Cho from Chosen Retreat, here with my dear brother Adam Roa, a poet, a storyteller, a guide whose words have a rare way of opening hearts. Adam recently shared a message from death, a poem offered during the 11 days of honoring Ximena, and it became a mirror for so many of us navigating love, loss, and meaning. In this conversation, we're going to explore regenerative dying, creativity as a vessel for grief, and how poetry can help us remember what truly matters, not just at the end of life, but in how we choose to live. And so, Adam, welcome. Happy to have you in conversation. I respect you very much and have had some beautiful experiences together over the last year in a very tender moment of sacred transition in my life. So, thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Tony, and I just love you as a brother and everything that you do and stand for. So it's cool that we get to dive in here.
Thank you. So you were at Chosen during the 11 days of honoring recently in November and on the Seeds of Remembrance, where we planted some trees for Ximena with her ashes. In fact, a papaya tree, which was the last food that she tasted in her mouth in a puree that I created for her the day that she died, a frangipani tree, and a magnolia by her favorite great oak, grandmother oak tree with the Mama Gaia statue. You recited your famous poem on death, and I'm just curious. It really landed with so many people, and I'm just curious, kind of like what was the origin of that, and what inspired you to write that beautiful poem, and kind of your relationship with death as well.
Yeah, well, that was such a beautiful ceremony and experience. I was really honored to be included and get to share those words. And that poem, A Message from Death, is one where I was in Encinitas, California at the time, and this was a community full of artists and creatives and entrepreneurs who were doing things differently. It felt very cutting edge, and some people in the community wanted to put on a show, like a theater show, but meets personal development. And it was very interesting. It was unique. I don't even know how to describe it now. And they asked me very specifically if I would deliver a message from death. And I went, I guess, sure. And that, like so many of my other poems, was that moment where I just said yes. And I think that creativity and the creation of art will take us on a journey that surprises us and oftentimes forces us to put ourselves into the consciousness of something else. And so that was one of those experiences where over the course of several weeks, I was sitting almost as if I was in a meditation or communion with death and allowing myself to be a vessel for that as best as I could.
Beautiful, beautiful. And this was actually the second time that you shared this poem.
Yeah, yeah,
Got
yeah. We
chosen, which is kind of amazing because Jimena actually got to listen to it, during her last year of transition. I think it was a year ago, basically, when you came for the first time for one of the artisan markets. So, and it was quite a beautiful. I think that was during the retreat with Zach Bell
Namuna.
and Namuna. Yeah, that was when you were there last, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
And
that was it was sort of an impromptu thing because it fits so perfectly with a lot of the ashram's teachings. And I know that there was and they were the people from the ashram actually were probably the biggest fans of it, to be honest.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, of course, death has been a theme growing up in community, growing up as I grew up in the ashram. My grandmother was a death doula in many ways and really helped people cross in a beautiful way and to see the light and follow the brightest light. And so she worked a lot with death and dying in the AIDS epidemic and crisis, in the 90s and early 2000s. And Kashi became a place for people to come and die. So I think that was kind of the foundation of me growing up and being more comfortable around death. And I think, my wife, Ximena, being with my grandmother Ma when she passed and witnessing, that ritual, the Hindu ritual of celebrating life, I think really inspired her, and helped her shape how she wanted to have a regenerative, beautiful exit from this plane. And I think that that was something that was really beautiful.
Well, I'm curious, Tony, because the message ultimately in the poem, "A Message from Death," is one of recognizing how much death provides meaning for life. And it really encourages us to recognize that our next breath is not guaranteed. And so, what do we do with the gift of breath, of life? And for you, having, experienced the recent transitioning of Jimena, what has that done to your perspective on life? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's been really a quite a eye-opening process, and really, I think all I can say is that it's teaching me presence and teaching me being in the moment more than ever before, and having gratitude for every breath. Jimena struggled, in the last part of her life with breath. She had cancer in her lungs, and she had this horrendous cough, and that was a big theme. And she was on oxygen the last 2 weeks. And there was a lot of anxiety around that breath. And so witnessing, my beloved having, shallow breathing and struggling, really made it very clear that we need to really embrace and appreciate every breath that we have. Every breath is a gift. And, I know that she believed that in her whole process, and she demonstrated that. In my opinion, she gave a master class on regenerative dying, and she said that cancer was her greatest teacher because it really made her have so much gratitude for every single moment of this precious life that we live and every breath that we have that so many of us take for granted. And, many of us just live unconsciously and don't realize how important it is to breathe, and take that breath, and that the breath is everything. We can regulate our nervous systems. We can eliminate stress through breath work and through controlling the breath, and really by slowing down the breathing, and, all of these techniques that, yogis have been practicing for millennia. We're now just starting to realize the power of them and how important it is. And so for me, the breath became a symbol of this gift of life because, like you said, we don't know when we will take our last breath. And it was very, very clear to me that, we only have a certain amount of breath in this life, and we have to use it wisely. And if we're angry, or we have a short fuse or a temper, we're wasting that breath and we're wasting that life. And so I think if you can measure the quality of your life by the quality of your breathing, I think it's a good analogy. And certainly a lot of people think that grief is tied to the lungs, and tied to breathing. And so I think Ximena had a lot of grief for Mother Earth. I think really the divine feminine and just kind of the wounds and the damage that have been done over time by humans to Earth and to the divine feminine. And I think that that was, in some way, she was embodying a lot of that grief. And that was a lot of the work that she did in her medicine journeys and her spiritual journeys that she did was really to address that grief and that collective grief of the planet, the planetary grief, so to speak.
Yeah. And so you just spoke about her plant medicine journeys and different things. I'm curious, this was something I didn't get to talk to you about when we were together, which was um, I personally have been on this really interesting journey where for many years what happened in plant medicine journeys and what I saw and the visions I had in my meditations and stuff became a integral part of my life. I took action based on them. I had some crazy experiences where visions I had came true that I'd never expected could even be possible. And so my faith and my belief in my visions was a lot. And I know that you and Ximena had medicine journeys and also just meditations and visions, and she was so deeply spiritually connected of getting through, of beating the cancer, and I'm just curious for you how it's like personally how it may have impacted your relationship to visions or plant medicine or any of that kind of thing. Because I know for me, recently, I've been over the last 2 years very shaken by a number of things that I thought, without a shadow of a doubt, were true visions, and then they didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, well, I think, both Jimena and I are optimists and manifestors. Man, I'm a manifesting generator if you talk about human design. And so we always held hope for the miracle because there's always a possibility in every moment, even if you think it's your last breath, that something changes. And so what I would say is that there was the acceptance that death is always possible in any moment and that the veil is very thin and we were walking very closely to death. And I was preparing for it because the signs were very evident and the diagnosis and the prognosis was very bleak. Jimena had cancer. It metastasized to her brain the year before. She had it in her lungs and her heart. 2 weeks before she passed, they removed 2 liters of fluid out of her lungs. It didn't improve her conditions. So there was this realization that, it's very probable. And there's all this new regenerative medicine and stem cells and things that are coming out that hold promise. And so I think there was always this promise for a miracle, but I think Jimena was very pragmatic and we had many conversations around the reality of what was going on. And I think she sat in 6 high-dose ketamine treatments throughout the last year and a half of her life. And in 2 of those treatments, she communed with the Palladians and other life force. And I think that gave her a sense of connection to the cosmos and to other life forms. I think that was very comforting to her. We did various divination work with some very, very high level teachers around the Egyptian traditions of the Temple of Ma'at, which we know that is the temple of death in the Egyptian tradition. And you would go to Ma'at and she would weigh your heart against the ostrich feather to see how lighthearted your life was to determine where you would go in the afterlife. And so there was a lot of spiritual preparation that we had done. And, Jimena had various different visions. She had a vision of herself, becoming the Bodhisattva, becoming the Buddha, and experiencing enlightenment during one of those ketamine journeys. And she had this feeling of not wanting to come back and wanting to just stay in that enlightenment. And so I think Jimena was very fortunate because she was a very light being and she was a very, in my opinion, she was a modern day saint. She just had no bad energy and no darkness in her aura. She had trauma, of course, everybody has trauma that they've gone through, a lot related to family trauma, a lot related to circumstantial or relationship to trauma of relationships, that we had gone through, whether it was bad business relationships or what have you. But in terms of her lightness, she was a very light being. So I think those visions really helped her accept because I never witnessed anything like Jimena's transition. And I've been around a lot of people who have transitioned. And Jimena really gave a master class in death and dying because she was really not focused on her own self. She was very selfless in her transition. She would heal people as they would come to try to help her and to be around her. She brought tears to the doctor's eyes just because of how brave she was, how graceful she was, how just exquisite she was. Even, she was in public at the last market last May for Mother's Day, like a month before she passed, and she was very weak and frail, but she was there. She was radiant. She was present. And so she was just present through it all. Didn't want to take any kind of numbing medications, Xanax, anything, morphine, to deal with the transition or the pain, etc. And so she was just very wanting to be present through the whole process, which was really remarkable. And I think it has a lot to do with, of course, the meditation, the breath work, everything that she has, she was very dedicated as a spiritual practitioner and sat in many medicine ceremonies, probably 5 times more than I did. Spent a lot of time in the Amazon, soul searching and really working on herself. Um, which surprised me because I'm like, you are so enlightened as it is. Like, why the deep quest for, deep quest for, sanctification or clearing your soul. But it was really just her curiosity, of spiritual enlightenment and knowledge that I think she was just really dedicated to. And I think it really helped her transition in a beautiful way. And she manifested her exit in such an exquisite way. She could have had a seizure, heart failure at any moment, all this. She could have gone to the emergency room, and she was able to transition in her own bed, surrounded by the people that she wanted, with the music and the ceremony as she had desired it. And that was just the most beautiful gift ever.
Mm, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things is to see someone like Ximena have such grace in death and such a profound level of peace with it. And I often feel it's the people around those who are dying that have a much harder time. And so, I'm did you have anger? Did like after she passed, I didn't see you until the ceremony, but I imagine there's been a whole roller coaster of emotions. Or have you handled it with the same level of kind of grace as you're describing?
Well, you know, not as much as Ximena. I mean, Ximena was a very unique and very delicate and, graceful being. I'm a little bit more wonky as a man and just as a human in general, but, working on myself. But it was a master class in caretaking I was so grateful that, I could be there for her in the way that I was and show up for her and attend all the doctor's appointments and, really be her partner because it's such a scary thing to go through. And I think that was, the biggest lesson for me. And, there was, the dying process started many years ago, and the transition process. So the preparation also started. She had been battling cancer on and off for 8 years, and the last round was 2.5 years. And, last, May, is May 2024 is when she had the seizure, where things really started to accelerate and got way more intense. But yeah, so it was really intense because also I was encountering so many challenges in business, and my head wasn't in, running my companies and doing, the day to day in a way. And so I had to really surrender to just what it was and to, focus on the priority, which was her. I didn't focus on my own health. I hadn't been to a doctor in, many years because the last thing I wanted to do was be in a hospital or another doctor's office because we were literally on phones with doctors every day in hospitals, dealing with so many different medications and so many trials and, chasing down so many rabbit holes to find the cures. And yeah, I think there was a lot of times where I was, losing faith and not understanding why someone that was so pure and so beautiful and so young had to suffer like this. It didn't make sense to me, and it just didn't. And it's starting to make sense more to me because I think Jimena's impact that she's having, in our global community, so many people have come up to me and say, thank you so much for, sharing this process and the way that you've been doing it and showing us, more regenerative way to approach death. And even people who came to the market yesterday, like were like, we lost these two sisters. We lost our mom last week. And, we've been so inspired by the way that you've honored her and the process that you've been through and, showing us another way than the traditional way that people immediately go into a funeral and then, put these caskets underground that then poison the earth. And it's just like the whole system around death and dying is really broken and horrendous. And, I'm not saying that the way that I did it is the way, but it is another way. It's an alternative way. And it was informed by Hindu traditions, informed by shamanic traditions. And it was the way that Ximena and I wanted to do it. And we were empowered to do it our way instead of falling back in and create our own traditions around it, instead of falling into what is expected or what are societal norms. And there's no such thing. It's what do you want? And that's why talking about death, I think, is so important, and really kind of planning your own death and going through that process and having death positive retreats, which now we're really planning at Chosen, and being able to host people, green burials, for example, and so many alternative ways, to be remembered and to die and to have a legacy. And it's just so yeah, so there's a mix of emotions, and it goes up and down, all the time. It's not ever static or one thing, and I've been held by community, and I think in some way community has helped numb the pain because, it's you have to face you're the quiet, and you have to face and accept. This is my first holiday without Ximena by my side in 17 years. And I have to sit in that reality and accept it and sit in the quietness. And, I've been looking through photos. A year ago, we were at solstice together, and then we went to get chemo in between solstice and New Year's. And, she was dancing New Year's at Sac Bay, with a broken vertebrae, fractured vertebrae that she didn't even know about because she had osteoporosis from doing the chemo. So just like those beautiful, fragile, vulnerable moments are the good stuff. And that's the fertile soil for this transformation that I've been going through. And yeah, it's rough. It continues to be rough, and I don't think that it will ever go away. And I don't want Jimena to go away. Like, we had something very beautiful and something very special that's timeless and eternal. And, she has had a lasting impact and will have a lasting impact in my life and so many others. So, yeah, there's definitely a range of emotions. And, yeah.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. It's been really beautiful and to get to know you and spend time with both you and Jimena. And I just want to comment on while so much obviously goes into Jimena's journey and the focus on the grace with which she approached the transition. I really want to just acknowledge you for the what I saw happening behind the scenes as the man standing for her, with her, beside her, and carrying her at time. Everything that you did um, as the partner in that. Because I think I remember, you remember we got tacos. We we got tacos in Miami, and we were just having that conversation and just getting to hear about the level of selflessness that you had to step into and embody. And like you said, go, I am not focusing on my business. I am not focusing on my health. I am not focusing on these things the way that I would want to, because all of me goes to her right now and everything that's needed. And I think that it can often be overlooked, the stress, the strain, the feelings, and everything that yeah. And I can only imagine the expansion that you went through to step into. We talk about these containers where ceremonies of all kinds, where we have to reach an expanded version of ourself to be able to meet the challenge. And to witness you in that has been pretty incredible. And I'm curious what maybe you've realized, wow, I expanded in this way and that I never would have imagined.
Thank you. And, I just feel like that's the duty of someone that loves someone so deeply as Ximena and I loved each other, and our relationship wasn't without challenges. Like, I don't want people to think like, oh, we were the perfect couple. We had a very pure, beautiful, sacred union that was human, with its human bruises and blemishes and all of that stuff. And, my Burning Man name is the Naughty Buddha, as you know. So I always told Ximena that I will never be perfect. I don't aspire to be perfect, but I'm almost perfect. And it was so beautiful because, like 2 or 3 weeks before she passed, she just, you know, said to me how grateful that she was, to have me as a partner, and that, you know, she couldn't have asked for anything more, and just that acknowledgement and just gratitude, because she was also my harshest critic, in most of our relationship. But knowing that I had done everything that I possibly could to protect her and to hold her and to be there for her, you know really, made me feel good that she felt held like that, and that she could be in her highest power, feeling secure because she had me by her side no matter what happened through thick and thin. And this was the ultimate test of a relationship, because yeah, this it was the worst time for me to have to go through, this experience, because there's never any right time. But like, I needed, I had so many business things like, crumbling before me that I wanted to attend to, but I just couldn't. And so it was just this profound lesson in acceptance and just being there and just trusting that whatever needed to unfold would. And the ultimate lesson is what Jimena asked for me is, her dream and wish for me was, please take care of yourself, lighten the load, simplify. And she spent the last few years as like this spiritual Mary Kondo, getting rid of shit from her closet and lightening the load and like cutting things. And we as men were creators and builders, and we often want more and more and like things, and whether it's physical possessions or material possessions or companies or whatever we think that we need or we want, really the biggest shift in my life is focusing on, me and my health and receiving, because I've always been in a lot in the giver mode, which I really enjoy as a Leo, as a host. I love, and you've seen that. I love entertaining people, but it can be draining. And many times it can be extractive because you put things out there, and it's really about discernment. And like, luxury is time. Luxury is sleeping 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, and listening to your body. I was thinking that recently, this morning, because I've been going to bed at 9 or 9:30 and getting up at 5. And I love being in alignment with nature's rhythms and the circadian rhythm. I get so much done before my phone starts ringing and people start calling me. And I have this practice not to look at my phone for the first few hours of the morning, and to be connected to myself and to nature, and be able to do an hour meditation if I want to, just because what's better than that? What's better than your mental well-being? I mean, there's nothing, and yet we prioritize everything else over those things. And so I think the biggest gift of Jimena in all of this is simplifying, lightening the load, having a much lighter heart, and really being present, because we're robbing ourselves of the gift of life because we're multitasking, or we think that we're present. We're looking at our phone while we're talking to somebody, or I'm looking at my WhatsApp while I'm talking to you about death, which I'm not doing. But like, that's what our society teaches us, is get it all done, do 10 things at once. And that's like the biggest piece of bullshit I ever heard in my life. And I'm just like, so I think that is the biggest gift. And I've just been shedding and simplifying and going inward and being more present. And like, even this Art Basel, like, I spent most of my time with my puppy Aki, who's my medicine dog. And, just not worrying, not having FOMO of missing this event or doing this. Like, this is a sacred time for me that I really need to focus on my aura and my energy and my time and my sacred spaces. And so, yeah, I'm grateful to Ximena for teaching me that and really for it to land. And for better or worse, I think this process has really been that has been the gift. And I may have not learned it if this didn't happen in the way that I have. And I think it's a daily learning. I'm not saying I've mastered it, but I'm embodying it a lot more.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you're speaking to something that I think is happening also collectively. I see it amongst our community, and I also, in my own personal life, so New Year's, I'm actually spending in a darkness retreat. So I'm going to finally get it done. 8 days, but 5 days in the dark. And I'll go in 2025 and I'll come out in 2026. Uh, I'm very curious to see
Love that.
if I can intuitively feel the when it happens. But for me, part of that has been because of everything that I've been building, everything that I've been doing, and starting to ask the question that you were just speaking to, which is how can I just simplify? I don't know if everything that I've been doing is necessary. I've been doing it a long time. And what is it that allows me the most joy and the most freedom? And what does that mean to me? And I can't think of a better way to do it than literally in absolute nothingness, but complete pitch black, just me. And but I am going in. One of my intentions is to go in with the stopping of the momentum. I think a lot of times just the momentum of life, especially when things are going well, that momentum is addictive, and that momentum is. We've all probably seen it. It's not always there. Sometimes there is no momentum, and it feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill. So when the momentum's there, you want to just keep it going as much as possible. And I think that um, the more people I talk to, the more this exact conversation is coming up. And that question of how do we strip away everything that's not important and really get down to what is.
I know, I love that. And where are you doing this dark retreat?
Poland,
Oh,
Poland.
wow.
Yeah. So it's I'm very excited to. I've been wanting to do it for several years, and I've always thought the past 2 years I thought I would do it on New Year's, and it just didn't work out. And then I wanted to do it on my birthdays, either New Year's or my birthday, and it never worked out, and it just happened to. So
Amazing.
yeah.
I can't wait to speak to you after that experience. The Kogis, the indigenous people of the Sierra Nevada and Colombia, their spiritual teachers, the Mamos, part of their initiation is to go into a cave between 8 and 16 years, and they don't see the light of day for that entire period. And their mentors, the elder Mamos, bring them food and education. And Jimena and I had the privilege to go to a Kogi village, which was off grid, no running water, no electricity, and live amongst them with their pagamentos and their spiritual practices. And we met like a 18-year-old mamo, and they put him in like as babies, as like early, young children. And we met this mamo who had just come out of the cave and just like having conversations with him about what it is of the world in the light and how he was so it's just such a beautiful, enlightened being and energy to be in his presence. And he was just saying how he really wanted to go back in the cave. And after being out for only a couple months, was like, whoa, this is this world. And that's like an indigenous world. That's not even like the world that we live in, the modern world. And, he was like, yeah, there's something deeply spiritual and deeply beautiful and comforting about being connected, to the inner light, the inner spirit, and through that practice of darkness, it's pretty amazing. So I'm
Yeah.
sure
Well, I'm
that,
sure we will see each other or talk on the other side of it. And
yeah.
yeah, it's my own mini death process to go and strip everything away and see what remains.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I really am, so grateful for our friendship, and the journey that we've had thus far. And I really admire and respect, the process that you've been going through as well. And, I love your discipline and your focus. And I know that you've recently written a book and, I've been through that process as well. And I know that you like are very focused on your kind of chunks of time and your discipline, and that's something I'm definitely calling in the next year. I want to learn, get in touch with the musical and creative side. I used to play piano in high school. I had a band called Electric Tofu that did like rock and roll covers and played the piano, and so I'm learning the guitar now. And that to me is living. That's luxury, not sitting on Zoom calls, all day long back to back, right? I mean, this is special. We're having a meaningful, beautiful conversation. But, I think, we're not intended, to sit in front of a computer 8 hours a day. That's not what we were designed to do. That doesn't bring us joy. And, we're in this world where there's so much. Keep on hearing so many more people committing suicide and so many people more lonely. And it's like we're more connected than ever in a way, but the disconnection is so much more pronounced and people are so much more sad. And, I'm just curious, like, you're doing this dark retreat, and I run Chosen Center for Regenerative Living, which mission is to reconnect people with nature so they can heal. And I'm just curious, as a influencer, as a thought leader, as a poet, as somebody who leverages technology as part of your platform and part of your storytelling, what is your opinion on, technology and where we are in the age of AI and all of these tools? Like, how do you feel? And as it relates to death and kind of like being more present in our life, like how do you navigate, that this current conundrum that we have in the world?
It's a really great question and possibly the most important conversation of our lives. Yeah, because I think for the first time ever, technology has given us the ability to completely outsource the creative process. And I think that that's a really dangerous thing because, and we've talked about this, but for people watching or listening, I see creativity as the process of putting together new patterns. And I see consciousness as the sum total of the patterns that you can see and recognize. And so every time I have an expansion of consciousness, it's because I've just been able to spot a new pattern. And what that means is if I actually outsource creativity, I am outsourcing the very process by which I expand my consciousness. And I think the moment that we start outsourcing the expansion of our consciousness, we atrophy creatively. Just our consciousness stops expanding. And I think that's a very dangerous space to be. And so, just like all other technological advances, it's neutral until we assign it meaning. You can use a hammer to hurt, or you can use a hammer to help. But never before has there been a technology that I think presents this crossroad. And so it's a very important conversation that I'm engaged in all the time. And for me, I personally, part of what I'm sitting with in my darkness retreat is also how I want to express online because I put out content that, if it's good, keeps people on the very platforms that I don't necessarily personally even want to be on. Like I don't want to be doom scrolling all night long, and yet I'm making content that helps keep people on that platform. And so I have my own relationship to figure out with it, but the meta conversation and the micro conversation within myself is very much alive.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating time. And I think, again, as an eternal optimist, I think there can be a lot of positivity if there are guardrails and technology works for humans, not the other way around. I think getting back to liberating time and spaciousness and opening creativity, if machines and machine learning and technology can eliminate us being in front of a computer and simplifying our lives and create more spaciousness, there also is an opportunity. And I think people are concerned about, losing all these jobs. Well, if the jobs that humans aren't meant to be doing, sitting in front of computers 12 hours a day and things like that, can be done by machines, well, then it can create a more spaciousness for another, what I call a regenaissance, a period where people can actually tap into their creativity and go back to kind of like, the soft skills that we've lost, like poetry and pottery and glass blowing and metalworking. And we've lost all of those trades. We've lost all of that creativity. People don't work with their hands anymore. They don't garden, But I feel like there is an opportunity as a counter proposal to the current paradigm of technology, where I think things that are made by people, by hand, that are artisan, that are creative, are going to have a lot more value than before because it's such a premium and such a thing that, with 3D printing of anything, and AI creating everything from books to, all kinds of manifestos to business plans. I think things that are actually made by humans and by human hands and that are artisanal are going to be very, very valuable. And so I
Yeah.
think there is a counter proposal to technology. And I think if we build frameworks, and that's something that we're doing with regenerative placemaking, I think it provides a platform for people to leverage the technology to advance, things like medicine, because I think AI in medicine is going to be profoundly for things like cancer treatment, for example, um, profoundly transformative, that is going to be a game changer for civilization. And there's all the other negative stuff, people committing suicide and murdering other people and having access to all that powerful information. So nothing is good or bad, right? But it's how we utilize it and what context and what framework we put together. Like I love, Shabbat. I love the Jewish tradition of people disconnecting, not talking about business, for 24 or 48 hours. And I think that's something that could be implemented in society, or at least we implement it in our retreat center, where you do get to disconnect and you get to reconnect with human beings one on one, and you get to reconnect with nature. So I think it's how we design. Not everybody has the discipline that you have, but how we design our societies to optimize for connection, to optimize for regeneration. And, I think death, getting back to the topic of our conversation, is the ultimate teacher, because I think there's so many conversations, particularly in our community, of biohackers who want to biohack their way out of death and that death is a disease. And I don't agree that death is a disease. It's a natural process. It's as regenerative as living. It's part of it. It's part of the cycle of life. And, you're going to be born, you're going to live, and you're going to die. And I am not a fan of trying to outsmart death. I don't think that that's a healthy endeavor. Personally, I think to live a beautiful life with that's full and healthy without disease, I think is very possible. I think we can eliminate a lot of the diseases with technology and modern medicine. But I think, we should embrace death, and graceful dying and walk gracefully towards our sunset as a beautiful practice. I don't think it shouldn't be something to fear, as you pointed out in your poem. It should be something to embrace and to know that there's something beautiful in the next, iteration and the next transition of this energy.
100% agree. And I think getting together in person is a major focus that I have in 2026. And yeah, I know is all about what you do. So thank you for everything that you do, Tony, and for this conversation. And hopefully it creates a positive ripple of impact for people.
Thank you, brother, and keep on spreading the love, the light, and I wish you an amazing journey in your dark retreat for the new year. And I'm very excited to hear what happens on the other side and looking forward to continuing to weave this beautiful tapestry in 2026.
Yeah. Love you, bro.
Love you too. Take care.